Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene. And today we're talking about rotating GMs.
Yes.
GMs? Did I say it right?
GMs.
Yes, okay.
But not just rotating GMs and games, but rotating GMs in a shared world.
In the same game.
Yes.
As in, everybody at the table has to be the GM the next time. They go like in an order or something.
Right. And that I think we've done this in a certain extent, but it was short-lived. Me, Mike, Felipe, Sip. And we do share GM duties, but playing in the same persistent world might be too much for us to handle.
I remember you and Felipe and Sip shared GM duties one time a long time ago.
Ooh.
Like when you were still playing in Salinas.
Yes.
Your brother's house.
Finally somebody took over GMing Pathfinder / D&D, whatever. Yeah, that was short-lived too.
Yeah.
They figured out that running games was very tough. But I think what happens is, I think this is a way of
Not making one person run all the games.
right, and you don't want, and you want to avoid GM burnout because it does happen. I know there's people out there who've been GMing for 30 years straight and never really love GMing and don't like being the player, but those individuals are usually rare. People who are the forever GM dads are people who, or person, are people who are doing it because they want to have company and they want their friends to have a good time. But I'm sure a lot of them wouldn't mind playing, yes, every once in a while. And so, but there's some good things about playing in a shared system world where things happen and the story changes. But you were reading an article what makes it a little bit different, where the GMs don't even share notes with each other.
Well, I read several articles.
Okay.
That one was bad ideas.
Oh, bad idea.
That one was a bad idea. It was like a bad idea that people do or that you could do.
Right.
And that was to rotate GMs each week, have the person, like they go in order around the table and everyone has to GM, then whoever it is has to GM the next week. They don't share notes and they just take the story. No collaboration or anything. So, the story could totally
Devolve.
Change or,
Yes.
You might be doing something else next week.
Okay, so that was just an idea of not to do. So here's what I like about this idea is it eases the load, right? The GM duties from one person doing it all the time. And I think it also eases the load when you're using a shared world, so the one person doesn't have to come up with everything the world is made up of.
Well, I did read some other articles, and one of the items that I was reading was some people, this one group, they were playing Blades in the Dark.
Okay.
That's where you play the
scoundrels, yes.
And the guy said, well, it's pretty simple. Everybody has a scoundrel character.
Right.
And they rotate GMs because, it's like an episodic thing. So
right.
Every week somebody else can be the GM and you can bring in the person who wasn't there, who was the GM last week, right?
Correct.
And he said that worked out pretty well because it was the shared world you're talking about.
Yes.
So it was a specific game, and since everybody was playing it, and it wasn't that hard for the people,
Correct.
And it went really well for them.
Yes, that kind of system and that game itself and setting, everything helps you be able to do exactly that. Because every game if you're playing it, every game takes place in this huge city. And that's all you know is this huge city. There's nobody ever, they might talk about it, but nobody's ever seen anything but the city. So that's the humongousness of this, medieval type city that you're dealing with. And you play street thugs. You play a low-level gang as trying to rise the ranks of ganghood. And since that's a story that's pervasive throughout all the what's the name of the game? Blades in the Dark.
Yeah.
It's easy for one person to have an adventure and then run that adventure, and then you have another thing to do with that same gang that would be totally different than what you did the previous week. As long as the player, the GM...
So it would be like a TV show kind of, right?
Yes, exactly.
Where it's the same people, different episode.
Right, and even certain shows that's an ensemble cast, not everybody
Is there all the time.
is there all the time. You only follow a couple characters in that storyline or in that group of actors, or in this case, characters. And I think that's a wonderful way of doing this kind of project or this kind of role playing. I put down not GMing all the time.
Yes, so it gives people a rest.
A rest. I mean, and I'm not talking about not GMing once, but because you're rotating everybody, it's you won't GM for another 5 weeks or 4 weeks, depending on how many players you have. And I think that's plenty of time to recharge your batteries. It's plenty of time to think of some interesting ideas, and it's just really good way of dealing with preventing GMs burning out. I think that's pretty cool. I put down bouncing ideas off each other. I think if you're a GM by yourself, you can't talk to your players, right? Because I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want to give away the story. But if other people are GMing, goes, well, what do you think about a situation like this? Not necessarily tell them everything,
Right.
but they might be able to say, oh yeah, I think the other players would like that. I wouldn't mind playing that situation.
One other group that I read about, they call it their round robin game.
Oh, there you go.
And they do basically, they have overarching ideas for the campaign, right? But as they go, each GM can pick something different too. So they have overarching ideas for the campaign.
Yeah.
And then each GM each week can go into, they can change it up a little bit, or take one of the other ideas, or keep running with the idea that you played with last week.
Right.
But that means that everybody has to be not invested in, it has to go this way as the GM, right?
Yes. I think, and that's another thing, that's a good skill to learn, is that you don't have to always have it your way as a GM. Because as a GM, you're in control of everything more or less at all times. I think letting go of the reins kind of helps you grow as a player and as a GM, because things are going to change and you can't always be in control, though you may want to be, but it's not always going to be possible.
And I think that's a lot of times with the people that always want to be the GM.
Yeah.
They don't like not knowing what's going to happen, or they think they could do it better, right? That
Yes, that does happen. No, I totally agree. Another thing I was thinking about is, as each individual GM runs their game, you are experiencing or could experience a completely different style of gaming, right? Somebody might be really good at intrigue. Somebody might be good at heists and and working with how you plan things. And some people might really be good at setting up maps and stuff for you to investigate or rob something, and all these things, right? So people have different types of talent and different styles of running games, and I think it gives the players a nice mix of different play styles, and I think that's interesting, and I think that's a lot of fun for players who can be in the same game and enjoy different types of games, even if it's the same game, and you're all more or less the same players. I think that could be a lot of fun, and it's an interesting thing to experience compared to the same GM over and over. I'm not trying to make it sound boring and repetitive, but sometimes GMs get in a rut and do the same thing over and over again. And I think rotating GMs kind of gives you that different perspective also of like, oh, I see what Jim is doing. Oh, I see how Janet ran that game. That's pretty neat. I think that's a good way of doing this. And then in fact, everybody gets better at becoming a GM because everybody's trading tips. Even if they don't planning on it, they can see and learn by playing in somebody else's game. Like some of the best things that I've learned have been in games where I played and I go, wow, that's a great idea to do that. That's amazing, and I've never thought of it on my own. I think that's what I like about running games, and I run the same adventure over and over again. Not over and over and over again, but I've run the same adventure a few times, and I like the idea of experiencing the game through different players' perspectives, and it changes the game fundamentally than the previous game I've ran with, or even an idea that I had in my head. Oh, this is what the players are going to do. This is how it's going to end, and sometimes it's nowhere near that.
I think that doing this would also show people how much prep work it takes to be the GM, right? And so one person was talking about how they tried it with a 5e game, and it didn't work out very well because some of the people didn't really prep for when it was their turn to be the GM.
Yes.
So if you're going to do it, like if you like the people we play with, most of them GM, right?
Yes.
So they're usually prepared, whether they're the player or the GM. But if you're playing with people who have never GM'd before, there might be a learning curve to it, right?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, there is a learning curve to all games, but I think sometimes people just don't want to GM because it is a little bit more work, or depending on the game, could be a lot more work than just playing, right?
I agree.
When you're playing D&D, and I don't want to pick on D&D, but everybody knows how D&D plays. When you play D&D, you have a character, you're in charge of this character, and that's all you have to play. That's all you have to worry about. A GM has to worry about NPCs, he has to worry about plots, he has to worry about how things work. And if you've never done that, and as a player, I think it's a good, what is it? It's a good experience, even if you suck at running the game, right? Even if you're like, oh man, I had a bad run. Everybody goes, yeah, you could have done better. But at the very least, you experience it, and then maybe you're not as harsh, or you give a
Think
little
so
bit
badly of what your GM does.
Yeah, give them a little break when sometimes things don't go as well as you believe it should go, especially if you never run a game. You should never, as a player, say, well, that session really sucked. I thought you did a bad job. Not that ever happens.
I know that for myself. You guys that wanted me to run Charlemagne, it was the Charlemagne Paladin. So I ran one of the adventures that was written.
In the book.
And that was like one of the first times I'd ever run an adventure that was written. And I was like, this is really, really hard. And I followed it, and I kind of changed stuff because I didn't like the way it went and different kinds of things like that. But the one thing I learned from that was I do not like tables where you have to roll dice to tell people stuff. And it's hilarious because...
Or for outcomes, you're saying.
For outcomes, because it's hilarious because we're playing Dragonbane, and everybody knows I hate when we have to roll the dice to see what happens, right? See if you make it through the night with nothing, or if something is going to happen to you, right?
Yeah, that is an interesting throwback to some really old style mechanics, but it's based on a really old Swedish game that came out when D&D came out.
But my point was that, I had run games before, but running a module was different for me. Yes. So I was really uncomfortable with it. And I killed somebody's horse because of the table. And I was like, I don't know. It says that you have to roll it on the table.
And yeah, his horse died. Yeah.
It was very sad.
It was very brutal.
So when you think about other people GMing in a group, going round robin, as these one people call it, then that could happen, right? You're not used to doing a certain you're not used to doing it. I could see how running a D&D game where you think, oh, well, this is easy. Maybe they wouldn't prep as much as they should.
Right. I think you're right. I think they might take for granted how much work it is depending on the game, right? Like D&D, probably you would have to have certain setup. I know there's people out there who, no matter what game, I could
improvise it.
I could improvise a whole session. I'm like, hey, but great for you.
To make it good for the players, you're going to want it, like, especially if you're playing D&D or Pathfinder, you're going to want monsters for them, or you're going to want
maps.
Possibly. So all of those things take time, and I have spent hours trying to get stuff together for monsters and for maps and all kinds of different things because you want your players to have fun.
Right. No, I think you're right. I think the problems I have most had with running games has been modules when I run something out of a book, because it's just the way my brain works. I rather, when I come up with an idea and I even write it out, the main idea I have in my head is what I originally ran with or came up with, and that's always going to be in the back of my head, and that's how I remember it. And so that is much easier to try and remember what I read about what somebody else wrote. Now, I don't know how you. I see that
with Felipe sometimes when we're playing Dragonbane. Yes. He's all, well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm going to change that as we're playing. And I think that's how I feel about modules myself. But if you're going to if you're doing a round robin GM kind of thing, I like the idea of overarching themes for the campaign or
Yes.
whatever you're doing. And then you can just go from there or play off what happened last week or you get it prepared. Because if you're doing it like every week or every 2 weeks,
Yes.
you only have a certain amount of time to think
prepare
about it, right?
Yes. I mean, switching every week is pretty tough because we have a hard time running or playing one adventure in one session. Us, our Friday night group, and
Well, we could be slow. I mean, because we like to think things out and have conversations about other things while we're playing.
have dinner and eat and things do come up.
But that's all role playing
Yes.
games, right?
I think, yeah, I think that is a big problem for me is the modules, and I think it's like reading a book, right? For me, like let's say I've read the Wheel of Time, and I'm like, oh, I read differently than you do, right? Because when you were reading the Wheel of Time, I remember we talked about, I forget what book it's. I think it's the first book even. You were saying how, oh, that was when Rand first channeled. I'm sorry if I'm what is it?
A spoiler?
Spoiler alert. In the first book called what is it?
The Eye of the World.
Rand, who is the Dragon Reborn. Oh, sorry about that spoiler. It's only been 30 years. The first time he channels, like uses magical energy, is when he's in trouble, right? He's confined in under like a staircase and the door's locked, and him and Matt are being kidnapped by these dark friends, but we don't know they're dark friends, but these bad people who want to kidnap him and take him somewhere, but they don't know who's the one that's the person they're looking for, so they take both guys or they imprison them, and all of a sudden there's a flash of lightning, right? Ching, and busts the door, and they escape through the smoking ruin of the door, the stairs, and they both get away. Now, I read that, well, there must have been some dry lightning somewhere, and it wasn't. It was him first channeling, and it was so shocking to me when you told me, Saul, that it was Rand who did that. I'm like, what do you mean? I was like, what do you mean? He goes, Jolene tells me, Rand, it was the first time he channeled. That's why he got sick afterwards. Remember he got sick? I'm like, OMG, right? Because Robert Jordan had for what do you call that? Foretold, how men who channel are destined to become crazy because that's the stories of ancient stories they told, and how they would, when they first did something, they would get ill from the reaction to their first time of using magical energy, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, man, I really read differently than you do, and my problem is I don't read as, what is it? Maybe detailed as you do, and so when you're running, when I'm reading the module, sometimes I'm like ignore things, and it might be an important thing to remember.
First off, I do not remember that conversation.
Yeah, we did. We had it. I mean, it was like before
30 years ago.
It was before Augustine was born.
Anyway,
it could have been 30 years ago. Yes, no,
no,
I didn't read it till like 1997.
Yeah, my uncle didn't buy them till 1996 or something.
Yeah,
like that, so.
But that's over 20 years ago. Over 25 years ago. Actually, a little bit more than that. Jesus. But we did have that conversation, and it was like before Augustine was born. I'm like, I just looked at you like, oh, like you had brought down tablets from the mountains, right? That's how I was like, holy crap. And so I think everybody reads and interprets information differently. And if you don't have a lot of time to prep and you're running a module or you're running something that somebody else wrote, it can be very difficult if you don't remember key parts of the information, or you're like, let me look it up. And that,
well, you and Bay like shared GMing for the One Ring, right?
Oh yeah.
Was that from a module, or was that? Oh, well, that must have driven him crazy the way that you you do stuff.
Actually, Bay said that I was literally being inspired by Token himself when he.
I don't believe that for a second.
Bay, you got to call into the show. Not that we have a live show, but I'm gonna have to get you on mic saying something on the microphone, saying something like that. But no, what happened was we did share. We were running the One Ring first edition. We're running the Darkening of the Mirkwood, which is an amazing campaign. It's just fantastic. And the reason we were both able to run those games, well, for me, is because it is more like an outline of things can happen.
Okay.
Right? It's just it's a little bit more than an outline. It gives you a lot of information and stuff. But I really like the style that they wrote, and it just made sense. I mean, those guys. I'm sorry, I don't know who wrote it, but those guys really know how to write, and it was like reading. For me, it was like reading a novel, reading the adventures, and the adventures were really like there were details, but a lot of it was just trying to invoke the feeling of a token story.
Right.
So that's how they told it, and that's how they explained it. And so when you're trying to run it, you're just trying to think, well, how would Token say this and do this and that stuff. And even if I didn't get some things right, it didn't matter because I was in that mindset,
Right.
at least in my mind, of how the story should go because we are playing in Middle Earth. And for the most part, I think a lot of people enjoyed it. Now, I don't know if the other players who had me and Bay run games, how they interpreted each of our playing styles or running styles. I'm sure Bay was a lot different than me, but they seemed to enjoy it, and I loved Bay's running that game, and I would play. Well, Bay's a good GM anyway, so I would play anything he ran. But I think that was why we were able to trade back and forth. And we talked to each other about like, which adventure do you want to run?
Yeah.
And I was just going by the titles of the adventure because
Right.
we couldn't read it.
Right.
I'm like, well, I think this one sounds pretty cool. And he goes, okay, you take that one, I'll take this one, and we kind of divided them up.
Right.
And as we went, you go, well, do you want to? Because you don't have to go in order, right? There's a certain order that you could go, but it's not necessary. It wasn't necessary. And again, that's what I liked about it, that it was very open-ended, seemingly, the way the adventures were written. But it was fantastic. I've had a lot of fun.
I know you liked playing in the games and you enjoyed running them too. I don't think I've ever shared GMing with anybody.
No.
And I would feel like a lot of pressure. I remember when we did our big game and had 3 GMs in and a very convoluted story. I know that it broke Steve. He didn't want to GM for a long time after that.
I don't think he's GM since. Has he?
He may not have.
I don't think he's GM'd anything. I mean, there is certain people, I'm not saying Steve is one of them, but there's certain people who would have a difficult time being a GM for whatever reason.
And he was really comfortable with the D&D setting, right?
Yes.
The Pathfinder D&D setting.
It was D&D. It was 5th edition. Yeah.
He was really comfortable with it. But unfortunately for him, he got a table full of guys who were like,
wasn't even
played
full,
it all the
two
time.
guys.
And they were really annoying.
Yes.
And they really got to him.
Yes. They flustered him.
Yeah.
And when one of those guys came to my table, none of that.
Right, because
I put my foot down. Well, I forget what he said. I go, no, don't worry about it. Well, the book, we're not worried about the book. I'm worried about the story. And he's like, but he was also upset that he didn't get to play with his wife.
His wife was having fun though.
Oh, she had a blast without her husband, which they're probably not married anymore. I'm just kidding. I have no idea. I never saw him again.
20 years ago.
No, it was only. I think Augustine was alive. So.
Yes.
So it was about probably a little bit over 10 years ago.
But that was a different kind of experience but the GMs had to really be on it together.
And be in sync. It was a lot of, so we ran 3 tables.
And I even remember telling Felipe, because Felipe's all, they're not getting it. I'm all, give it to it.
So it was a crazy idea that I had. We run 3 tables concurrently at the same time in the same room. And I was thinking that we separate the tables by these cloths that would hopefully drown out some sound. It did not. But
it did. It separated the tables, though.
It did separate the tables, so they couldn't really see each other. What I thought would be intriguing is if they were playing like the D&D people, and then I had an urban fantasy setting, and I had a futuristic science fiction setting. And what we did is after a certain amount of time, we took 2 players out of those 2 tables and we rotated them from D&D to urban fantasy, from urban fantasy to tech, from tech to fantasy. And I thought it would be really interesting. They just kept the same characters.
And the best part of it was the sorceress, right?
Oh, yes.
When she came from D&D to the urban fantasy, they knew there were witches, right? Because they believed in that in the urban fantasy. But when she threw a fireball, I remember Jonah was in that game, wasn't he? He was like, she threw a fireball.
So it was funny because nobody really knew what we were doing.
Right. Nobody knew what
I mean,
we were
the
doing.
urban fantasy people, they were investigating something weird happening,
Yeah.
right? And so they're like, oh, okay. And they had, they had gun skills and all this other stuff. And there was one lady who was a witch in that one.
Yeah.
And she was like, a new age person, had all these rocks and dressed kind of weird. And then they get into a chase scene. And then I think she says, she looked at her character, she goes, and she didn't say nothing. She goes, can I actually do that? I go, yeah. I go, if you think so. And she goes, okay. And she got all into it. She goes, I'm going to say a prayer, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to throw my hands forward. And then and she goes, fireball. And then Jonah looks at me and he goes, what do we see? I go, you see a fireball come out? He goes, I see a fireball. And he was like, almost fell out of his chair. He goes, and then it just totally blew his mind. He goes, what the heck is going on here? So it was real fun. We really had a good time. I really had a good time. Felipe was a little bit frustrated, and Steve was completely
Felipe
broken.
was frustrated because there was a
damn puzzle.
And
don't do puzzles. Don't put puzzles in them. Don't do puzzles.
He was getting frustrated because he was trying to give him the clues to the puzzle, and some of the people that moved to his table weren't cooperating with him.
It was like they didn't know what to do.
Yeah, they were confused.
Yes.
So.
And then the people who had been there at that table already going, well, we don't know what to do either. So how do you guys do things? He goes, we just ask the computer and it answers all our questions. Like, how do we fly the ship? Well, we tell the computer to fly the ship. And they're like, oh.
Once they realized that, it was much better.
So Felipe made the ship alive.
Yeah.
It was sentient. So that was interesting. I didn't know about that. And I thought it was an interesting idea. But the puzzle, it was like a physical puzzle, wasn't it? It was a verbal puzzle.
It was a verbal puzzle.
And they couldn't get it. And I'm like, and then what was happening is they're all supposed to be in sync, solving the problem more or less at the same time. Because then at a certain point, we rang this gong. And then that's when the players would shift. The characters would shift.
It was like every 30 minutes or something.
No, it was like, I think it was every hour.
Yeah, it was very stressful for me because I was in charge of that part.
Yeah, she was in charge of all our tables being in sync. And
Steve was freaking out. Felipe's like, I don't know what to do. They're not getting it. And I was like, I don't think that's exactly how he said it. I think he was like, they're not getting it. And I'm like, just give it to them.
Yes.
And so he did, which was a relief for me.
And then they were relieved too because they were getting frustrated players.
Yeah,
So
puzzles are hard.
that goes beyond just trading off with the baton from one week to another. All the GMs have to be in sync. All the GMs have to be, their timing has to be right. And for the first and only time that we ran that game, I thought we did an excellent job.
I think you guys did an excellent job. I think Steve did a good job because those people were really bothering him. Felipe always does a good job when he's GMing,
and I think and
you had a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, I had a blast. And I think if Steve hadn't had those two guys in his table right away, it would have been fine.
Yeah,
he would have been fine. People would have just rolled with the punches, even though he didn't quite know everything correctly. Because I think 5th edition had just come out.
Yeah.
Maybe a year or two before, and I still come across some of those notes from that game.
Yeah.
Like the table order and stuff like that. So it's pretty interesting. I should think about running it again. But
no.
But
that was
the one and only chance to do it. I think it was good. I went to go play a Star Wars themed game using the Cypher system, and they had 5 tables, but they were sent on different missions on the same planet. And then as they did different things in different places, then they gave us bonuses to each other. Right? It was interesting, but the problem was they had the same problem we did. Some tables were super fast through the problems, and other groups were very slow and behind.
We also came across that Celesticon one year when Augustine wanted to play.
Yes.
And it was this big game, and there were 3 GMs.
Yes.
And it was
there 3 different tables.
3 different tables, and it was very interesting. He was pretty young though. Still,
he was 9.
Because towards the end he was pretty tired.
Yeah, and I think it was going really late. I kept coming back to check on him.
I stayed with him.
And then did you the whole time?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Because he was 9.
I know, but I thought, but he was like at one point it was almost.
It was after. It was close
12.
to midnight. Yeah.
It was after 12, and I looked at him, and he's like, I go, do you want to go to sleep? And he goes, yeah, I want to finish the game, but I'm really tired. I'm like, you know what? And I told the GM, like, because what they did is at the final battle, they put all the tables together and they had this huge, like, diorama
Yeah.
of figures and terrain and objects and a castle. And the demon was throwing lightning bolts from up on his castle and stuff. And I went up to GM and go, you know, my son, you know, he's really tired. You know, I'm gonna take him to bed. He goes, oh no problem. I understand. It's okay. He was a great kid. He was a great player. So you know, I took him to bed and he had a great time. But I mean, I wish you know he could have seen the ending of it. I mean, everybody who plays,
But he was falling asleep.
but he was falling asleep. I mean, he was only 9, and he had a hard bedtime at what 8 at
Yeah,
that time.
yeah.
So for him to stay up till 12
Yeah.
was quite a feat.
Now he doesn't have a bedtime, so he stays up all night.
Yeah, but what happens when you're in early 20s. So what do I have here? I like the idea. Players, they have persistent characters, and they can see them leveling up and having all the goodness that it is to have the same character.
That was one of the things that I read about also, was that the one group, they only let the characters level up after everybody was a GM once. There were like 4 of them.
Ooh.
So every time the round went around back to the first person, then everybody got to level up, which I thought was a very interesting idea about, instead of, because you were getting experience as you're doing it, whatever game you're playing.
Yeah.
And there's another game that we played where you leveled up at the end of the game, or at a certain point when the GM thought everybody had accomplished something.
Right.
I have no idea what that was, but I remember it was more interesting than you finally have 5,000 experience points.
Right.
You get to go up to level 2.
I think there's some alternate experience leveling process in D&D where it says the GM can just decide when you gain a level.
And I think maybe that was it.
The problem, okay, there's a problem with that in the sense that sometimes people play favorites, and that could really be detrimental to the group. Like if you're just giving out experience, and then I used to like give out experience back in the old days, like AD&D. You got experience for killing the monster. So if you were the last person, somebody's killing it and doing all kinds of damage, you come and do 3 points of damage and you get all the experience.
I didn't play with you then. Since I've been playing with you, it's an equal.
Yeah, so everybody gets
Everybody
all the
encountered
experience.
the dragon.
Yes.
Everybody encountered this.
Or even if you never fought the dragon, but you were
encountered
involved,
it, yes.
Yes, I would count up all the experience of everything they killed or got past, and then divide it by the number of players. Bada bing, bada boom. Everybody more or less is the same level. And then, of course, back in AD&D, people went from, like, the thief had the lowest amount of hit points, of experience points before he gained a level. I think it was like 900, where the wizard or the cleric had to have 1,200. So people, even if they had the same amount of experience, they could be different levels.
Right.
And if you multi-class, it was even crappier.
So that's something to take into consideration if you're going to do a round robin.
Yes.
GMing sessions, right? Where, I don't know, it would be besides just where it's going to go that week.
Yes.
I find it interesting that if there wasn't a plan, like when you and Bay did it, you at least had titles to look at.
Right. And then there was an arc within the adventures, right?
Yeah.
The darkening of the Mirkwood. That was the whole point.
So I think if you're going to do that, I would suggest that you have some kind of overarching theme.
Yeah,
to
the grand plan.
Yeah.
The not Battlestar Galactica, the Babylon 5, right? The whole battle between good and evil, chaos and order.
Or you need to get from
getting rid of those guys.
You need to get from Water
Sorry about
Deep.
spoilers.
You need to get to Water Deep, from Water Deep to Siseo or something.
Yeah, Suzeo, yes. So another thing is, and this is pertinent to some people in my group, is players don't need to learn yet another system. Some players really abhor us experimenting with them. I don't know why. And making them learn a new system every time I decide I want to play a new game or bought a new rule set. And they complain, they moan.
And then they do it anyway.
And they do it anyway. And there is a learning curve, right? There is every different game. you got to know how the mechanic works. What's good, what's bad. Well, is a bonus of 3 good, or is it crappy? Well, if it's a percentile system, probably pretty crappy. If it's a D20, it might be pretty good. If it's 2D20, that's pretty good too. So there's that learning curve. What can my character do? What is the concept? What is going on? And all that other stuff. So I think in that case, if you have players like that are not interested in trying new things for whatever reason, or they're not interested in learning new things, new systems, and I see it could be daunting. And then one argument is, well, we'll play it once or twice, and then we'll never play it again. I go, yeah, I can understand that. What is it? Your level of investment of time is. We could have just played a game I already know. So I understand that problem, and
but you're gonna pull your friends kicking and screaming into the new games and make them do it.
Well, but I'm saying if you stay in the same game and in the same world, then that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I can see it being working for lots of different systems. Like if you're in a D&D world, you can have, or even Blades in the Dark. Those kind of things where you all have the same character, or each person has their character.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if they're there for every single adventure.
No, you're right, and it works out.
Works out fine.
Right. What I'm just saying is that sometimes players themselves don't want to learn another system, and they believe that they're only going to play once or twice.
Yeah.
It's the risk reward, or the amount of time.
But if they know that it's going to be for 6 months and you're all going to be GMing it,
right,
then that
would make it better. Negatives, I think we already discussed this sort of diverging storylines. Let's say you're going in one direction, and the next GM goes, forget that. You got to go over here, and they're like, "Oh, what are you guys doing?"
I would call it a side quest.
Side quest.
All right.
Sidebar, please. You're gonna talk on the side. I think it's still hard to have that long story arc where, unless you pick one person to say, "Okay, you're gonna come up with the long story arc," or you have the idea, because I don't know if everybody should know where this is all going.
Right.
To me, that's part of the mystery. That's part of why I play games.
Well, that's why I think that it would be better with like a Blades in the Dark kind of game where it's episodic.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
So that you could do the same thing with D&D. You're going from to run town.
You're just murdering hobos, so you're out there just gaining levels.
You're searching to save the princess,
right?
And then the next town you come into, they need help with their. There's
not too much mystery in it then, in that sense. Well, you're there. You're trying.
It's not an overarching theme. It's just
there is
episodic.
an overarching theme. Like you're trying to save the princess,
yeah.
But it takes you 6 months or a year to do it.
Oh, well, what I was thinking of is one week you're trying to save the princess.
Oh.
The next week you're trying to fix somebody's dam, or clear out goblins, or different.
So a real episodic game.
That's what I was.
But that's what I'm saying. It's hard to have that episodic,
overarching one. Yeah.
Yes.
You couldn't. If everybody knows who the big bad guy is, maybe like there's a evil wizard in this place,
yes,
and you have to try to get there.
Right.
That's not going to give away too much information.
No.
And then, whereas if it's a specific thing, like you need to hit this city and this city and this city, then that might be giving away too much stuff.
Correct. Another thing is different GM styles might be hard for players to keep track. I think this is kind of a real little what is it?
That's very picky.
Picky, but some people like the way a certain GM runs the game, and when another GM runs the game, they're like.
And what I say to this is, you should play with more than one GM so you can see that everybody runs it a little bit differently.
Correct, but the thing is, if you're going round robin, blah blah blah, you might start to develop like, well, I really don't like the way Bill runs his game. And I really like the way George does. George runs a really game.
And then I would tell you to
Sherry
get over it.
Sherry runs the best game. So can we just have Sherry run the games? No. I mean, that's probably not going to happen, but you're still going to like certain games, certain styles of GMing may appeal to you more than others. That's all. And if you can just, well, it's not that big of a deal and play and have a good time, it's not a big deal. But if it's like, well, I'm not going to show up that day when George is running. Okay. And then, you know what? Jim's never here for George's game. What's going on? I mean, you might hurt people's feelings. I mean, I'm just saying it could be a minor thing. I think if you are playing in a game like that, like it's a run robin, I think there's a little obligation to show up as often as you can, even if George's running isn't your cup of tea. And then, of course, there's always the favoritism, both by GMs and players, right? GMs liking a certain character. Couldn't even it may not even involve the player. Like, oh, Susie's really pretty. I don't want to kill off her character. It could be, oh, Susie's character is a real badass. I really like that concept. And you show favoritism to that character or the player. It could be both ways. One of our friends would always say that. They goes, I'm starting not to like playing with these guys because I can do something and it'll be really difficult and I have to roll. And this is his perspective, their perspective. And then somebody else does something outrageous and the GM goes, oh yeah, you could do that. So it really got to him to the point where he didn't want to play with them anymore. And that's kind of sad, right? So that is another thing that could happen when you're going around and around and showing favoritism. It doesn't work. I think actually playing round robin instead of staying with one character, one GM is going to soften that blow.
Yeah.
And maybe it would have saved my friend's table group from him not leaving it if people would share the duties of running games, especially in a persistent game. Like if it was a game that he liked.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I can see that. I know that sometimes I think maybe you don't try to kill me in a game, but
you
and people might think that that's favoritism, but I know that you do try to kill me just as much as you try to kill the other people.
I don't try to kill anyone.
I'm just saying when you're playing the bad guys, right?
Oh, I think I utilize you being well. There's
chaotic.
Two girls in the group, women in the group, and I use you guys to
as a catalyst.
Yes, as a catalyst for the other players. For example, when you went down, I forget what adventure I was running. It might have been the Frost Giants or something. You went down at one point. It was like Frodo getting stabbed with the spear.
Yeah.
Everybody stopped and like, oh my God, our sorceress is down, and rushed to try to get to you.
Of course, Alan and I were behind somebody, right? You
guys were behind enemy lines.
Yeah.
Because you decided to dimension door.
Yeah.
And he went with you because you decided to go by yourself and not say anything. And the only one that noticed was Alan. So Alan, what are you going to do? I'm going to jump through the door. I go, okay. You know that the door is opening behind all the bad guys where nobody can help you. It's okay. And so he went through just to help you.
I know.
And then he was protecting you. Of course, you went down like a sack of
potatoes.
And then after you went down, I think it was a concerted effort to get to you. And I thought that was pretty neat. In a certain sense, it was the exact opposite of favoritism because I kind of picked on you to motivate the action of the rest of the players. But I hardly ever did that.
No, but I've heard that is one of the things that happens in groups where the boyfriend and the girlfriend.
Oh, yes.
That you know,
horror stories.
Horror stories about that, or the husband and wife.
Yes.
Where I don't think I have that problem because currently we're playing Dragonbane, and one of the things that my character is supposed to do is she's fearless, right?
Oh, yeah.
She's supposed to run in without thinking about it, and that's kind of hard for me as a player because I like to overthink stuff. So I try to do it at least a couple times every time we play the game so that I can gain experience and stuff. And I put myself out there doing it, and then I do get hit and take a lot of damage sometimes.
But yeah, because you're more squishy. You don't wear armor. You don't have a lot of hit points.
I have leather armor, but
yeah, but I have like plate armor.
I know. I'm just saying, but
there's a difference.
So I can see how people would think that sometimes. I don't know that there's favoritism sometimes.
Oh no, there is. I've seen it in role playing games when I play at conventions. I've seen it like somebody's girlfriend is playing and like. And not that it wasn't fun, but it was very, very
annoying.
Very noticeable, and it wasn't. It was just very noticeable. It wasn't annoying to me because I could give a crap. I'll do my own thing. But I could see like if it was my home group and this was happening constantly, I'm like, you know what, she can't play anymore, or you gotta have somebody has to be the GM because this is not working. And I've heard horror stories about things exactly what you said, is where the girlfriend can't do anything wrong, gets all the good stuff.
That might be a thing when you're working around the table with the GMs, right? So there's going to be different styles, but that might make the favoritism go away.
Yes, of course.
Right?
Yeah, because then other people are going. Then the GM who's showing favoritism might go, "Oh, I see that I might be favoring this person, and I shouldn't do that." And I think that's probably the best thing out of something like this is within your own group, whatever how big that group is that you share the GM responsibilities, which usually does not happen. A lot of GMs become the permanent GM, one reason for another, or they just get settled. Everybody gets settled. Oh, Saul's running the game. He's a good GM. I really like the way he runs the games, and you just get comfortable with that thing. That whole system. But as you rotate GMs, you learn how to become a player as a GM, and not just be the god that controls everything all the time. I mean, that's happened to me where I've been running so long and so many games, and somebody else runs a game. I'm like, I wouldn't have done that, right? I would have let my character do this that I wanted to do. That's not fun, right? And I was being real judgmental about the other GMs.
You're usually judgmental anyway.
That is completely not true.
So true.
But rotating GMs more and more and less GMing for me has given me like, oh, that's just the way they run games.
Yeah.
It's not me running the game. I got to play my character the way I want to play my character or how I see my character and enjoy the GM for how they run their game. And honestly, games have become more and more fun for me since I stopped GMing all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that was years ago when we started the 3.0 D&D games in 2001, I believe, around there. That was my intent. I go, we're going to have this. We're all going to play in Forgotten Realms. I'm going to run the first set of adventures, and somebody else is going to take the mantle and run the GM. Play the GM, and then we're going to rotate, and then run the games. And every time I start my adventure, I'm like, okay, who wants to run next? Oh, I'm not ready. I don't think I've read the rules enough, blah, blah. And the problem I have is I let them slide. I let them slide too much, and I became the permanent GM.
Just for a few years, right? Then
20 years. Maybe not 20.
No.
More like 15. A good 10. A good 10 years.
Yeah, whine and complain, babe. Whine and complain.
I know. I think it's a good learning process.
And I've never done the round robin GMing for the same game.
No.
I know that you and Mike and Felipe and Jim, I think, did that when
I
you
think
were
we
playing.
tried doing that with this game set called Low Life.
It was something with tiles that were not tiles, but you were on Roll20, but you would turn something over, right, to be in a different, whether it was the grasslands or.
I
don't know the name of the game.
I don't know what game that was. Yes, we shared the world, and it was unexplored, but we were using low fantasy gaming system, which is like a OSR mixed with a little bit of a 5th edition stuff thrown in. It was low fantasy gaming, so not such high levels. Basically D&D stripped down.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun, and I think Jim just wasn't able to play as much. So as soon as he left, that game kind of died out. Yes, but that was interesting. Yeah, we did. I'll take this part of the world. You take that part of the world. You take that part of the world.
So you have done it. I've just never done it.
I think it was difficult because we were not on the same page. Not all the GMs.
But I do like playing playing in games with different GMs because you get to experience it different.
Right.
So it's good for the players too. This
they get to
whether it's a
experience
round robin GMing or having somebody run a different game the next time we play.
Well, that's like what we do on Friday night.
Yeah.
Because Felipe's run Dragonbane, Mike's run Traveler, though I don't think he played Traveler.
That's okay. I don't need to play Traveler.
Mike ran Vroot. I ran the Western game, and Morgan ran something.
I haven't
ran
anything for a long time, but
that's true.
I've been really
That's
busy.
your time. You're up.
Yeah, we'll see.
Get you out of the bullpen. So anyway, rotating GM duties, rotating the persistent world, I think could be really fascinating. Not without a little bit of work, but I think it could be truly rewarding.
So there you go. If you think it's a good idea, go ahead and try it with your group. They might rebel at first, but I'm sure that they'll take to it like a fish in water.
Just bring down the mailed fist upon their head. Bring them in line.
There you go. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul,
Angeline.
and you have a good night.